Well, I think this is simply wrong. You need to look at the record of these forecasters. Bear in mind that the Treasury's official forecast said that simply a vote to leave the European Union would lead to an increase in unemployment by 500 to 800,000. And the Bank of England's forecasts that David Davis went through at the recent meeting of the Exiting the European Union Select Committee after the vote to leave for the immediate impact were wrong on every single count. And this is a forecast for 15 years based on a variety of assumptions that have proved wrong in the past. Other economists, such as Patrick Minford and his group at Cardiff University, have come up with very different forecasts because what matters are the policies that you implement. And if the UK is to open its market, to move to free trade, to remove tariff and non-tariff barriers, reducing the cost of food, clothing and footwear, then there's a huge opportunity for economic growth and not a lower rate of growth.
So you're questioning the validity of forecasts, but in that respect, where is your evidence that a hard Brexit will be beneficial in the long term, post 15 years?
Well, the question is, what do you mean by evidence? That with economics, it's always making assumptions based on past experience and on economic theory. So if you look at the past experience of free trade, that has helped every country that has ever adopted it, whether it's been one-way free trade, opening up your market, or whether it's been reciprocal free trade. So if you take that historic precedent and you look at the econometric models run by people like Patrick Minford, you find that there's very strong economic growth coming from it. Forecasts are less accurate the longer you go out. So a forecast for 1 year has some of the information already there, some of the things you know, and it's easier to make. A forecast for 15 years, whether it's mine or it's this leaked document, is much more an expression of opinion and theoretical.
So
it
in that
isn't
case,
hard
does anybody
fact.
know, if we're criticising everybody else's forecasts and assumptions, does anybody actually have the answer? Because that's what people at home want to know. They're looking at this leaked report and go, it's all very well and good voting out or voting to stay in based on principles, but when it hits people in the pocket, that's when people are going to start saying, well, you know, where's the evidence? Where are the hard forecasts of what's going to happen to us when we leave the EU?
I think you're right, and it's better to deal in facts. So what fact do we know? Well,
which people would say we're lacking at the moment.
Well, let me give you some.
Okay.
When we leave the European Union, we will stop having to pay money to the European Union. That saves us net £10 billion a year. That's money we can spend, for example, on the health service. We will take control of our tariffs. Tariffs on food, clothing and footwear, which makes up 21% of the average household budget, much higher for the poorest people in society, can be reduced. And those are, for example, 11.5% or thereabouts on both clothing and footwear, plus VAT. So that's a large saving that could be made for people in their daily purchases. That's something we know we could do. It would be under our control. So we want to deal in facts, what we can do, and what we can do to help raise people's standard of living.
OK, well, that's what you're predicting we'll gain. It's still a little bit woolly as to what we will lose out on. That's all going to come out in the wash. But
well, that's because I don't think we will lose out, because I think membership of the European Union has been a trap. That what it has done, it has made prices higher by preventing more competitive goods coming into the country, but it's also introduced large levels of regulation that are not there for safety or on scientific basis, but are there to make our markets less efficient and less competitive and protectionist against the rest of the world. So we don't lose by leaving.
OK, you're flexing very much your muscles and your facts on this hardline approach to Brexit.
I don't have many muscles. I'm a bit of a weed.
Well, you've got your flexing because you're talking out a lot this week about the Prime Minister and her dealings with the talks. Liam Fox, the Trade Secretary, has said hardline Brexiteers like you, it's tough, really. You're going to have to live with the disappointment and accept a softer Brexit. That is the way this is going.
Well, I saw what Dr. Fox had to say in The Sun this morning, and he's talking about the transition period. The issue here is, what are we transitioning to? That currently the government seems to be saying it will accept the EU's negotiating terms for the transition without having set out what the end point is, or even the date on which the transition would come to a conclusion. It's no good stepping out not onto a bridge but onto a plank. That's the problem with the transition, is we don't know where we're going, and the government needs to set out, reiterate what the Prime Minister said in Lancaster House and in the manifesto, where its end state is going to be.
OK, talking about planks, is the Prime Minister walking one at the moment? Because there's so much criticism at the moment about her leadership. You've publicly come out in the last few days and say you are backing her position, but then on the other hand, you criticise her handling of the exit talks. So it doesn't really add up. Are you backing the Prime Minister? Is she the right person to lead us to Brexit?
I'm fully backing the Prime Minister. My criticisms are more directed at the Chancellor of the Exchequer, who has been talking about being in a customs union and a high level of regulatory alignment, which is not government policy. I'm backing.
So if he's undermining the Prime Minister, should he go?
Well, that's a matter for the Prime Minister. That the Constitutional Convention is that the Prime Minister advises the Queen on who is in the government, and it's not for me to say who she should have or not have. But
you can offer an opinion.
Well, what I would say
if you're worried about people undermining the Prime Minister, those closest to her, it can't be good, can it?
I think it wouldn't be good constitutional practice for me to start taking potshots at individual cabinet ministers. But what I would say is a general lesson of history: when the Prime Minister and the Chancellor of the Exchequer are not getting on, that is not good for the government. That was true with Tony Blair and Gordon Brown. It was true at the end of Margaret Thatcher's period when she and Nigel Lawson fell out. So it's very unhelpful that Mr. Hammond is freelancing and making himself a semi-detached member of the cabinet.